Hello friends, welcome back once again. Today we'll learn about what is Git. We're not learning about GitHub, GitLab or Bitbucket. We're just learning about what is Git. Okay, so let's dive in. So first let's understand what is version control system. So before that, let me create a directory. I'm going inside that directory and let me open a VS Code. Let me create a new file. So version control system. So what is version control system? If you have multiple files and you want to track the changes, what the history of changes for that file, so how do you generally do? So previously it used to be something like this. So let me create a new folder and let's say 2023 and then let's say 0101. So on that particular day, let's say I've created a couple of files. Let's say file1.txt file. Let's have creating new file, file2.txt file. In file1, let's say I have git is awesome. In file2, yes, git is version control system. Let's say I have a couple of things in file1 and file2 on that particular day. Let's say on the next day, I wanted to change these files. So probably what I would do, I will just say copy paste, I'll just create a copy and probably create a new date and then probably just change this. This is a new update. Let's say for file 2 we don't have any update. So everyone's choice of their version control used to be something like this. So finally they ended up with having a different directories based on the days they worked on particular files, and it's confusing to update any file. Let's say they're updating a file, let's say file 2 today, and they want to go back to a couple of days back and see what is the history, and after looking at the history they wanted to use this as a final file and then trying to update. So it's very confusing to which directory they have to go and then to which file they have to update, because the file names are very similar, just the directories are different. Also just assume that I currently I have just only a couple of files, but what if you have an entire like 20 to 100 files in a repository, in a folder, so it will be very confusing to update, to understand which file, which directory I am in, and it's very difficult to track. So that is the main reason we have a version control system. A long ago, programmers developed a local version control system. It's a local database version control system, which exactly looks something like this. So we have a local computer. Let's say we have a file, uh, the version database. So as soon as you update a file, it will store in different versions. So version 1 of this file, version 2 of the file, version 3 of the file, in something called version database. So this is something called local uh, version control system. One of the examples of local version control system which is still under use is RCS, which is revision control system. Again, it stores multiple revisions of the files, right? It can automate the storing and retrieval of different versions of the files, like it can be a source code or programs, documentation, graphics, papers, etc. So what we learn is basically in order to track the history of files or set of files. So they have developed local version control system, and example is RCS, which is just we saw. So this issue was resolved, I mean, to track the history of files. The next major issue uh, that the developers are facing is like, how do we collaborate? Like a single developer will not be able to uh, develop the entire product, right, entire software. So there will be a group of developers and testers, and right, so they should be able to collaborate, updating one folder. In order to address that issue, so they developed something called centralized version control system. What is centralized version control system? So we have one centralized server where a file versions is stored. So we are calling it as version database. So in this centralized server, each developer will check out that particular file and then work on it and then update the file back to the server. Similarly goes for computer B. Let's assume this is a developer B. He pulls the file, he start updating the file, and then he pushes that particular file so that this file version is stored in that server. So we see the advantages here is it is better than local version control system. So a developer need not maintain different directories to store his history of changes of the file. So there is a centralized server for this. The other advantage we get is, let's say the client has a full control over the server. He can also track each developer's progress on that particular source code or the source files. But the major disadvantage with this is, since we have only one server, and what if the server fails? So we don't, I mean, again the issue is same. So again we have to take the backup of the entire folder. That is a major drawback, and hence to resolve that problem, again we have something called distributed version control system. This is how the version control system looks like. So you have uh, you're tracking that different versions of the files in a server computer, as well as you're tracking the different versions of the files on a computer A. Let's assume a developer locals machine, developer B locals machine. Okay, so here if even the server gets lost, we still have the entire versions of all the files in developers A machine. So what if developer A's machine and server both gets lost? We still have the entire history or the track changes of each and every file in developers B local machine. So Git works on this distributed version control system architecture. The basic difference between Git and any other version control system is, in case of any other version control system, basically the tracking of each versions is on file basis. So file A has changed on version 2, and on version 4 the file A has changed second time, but file B has changed version 4 at the first time and version 5 at the second time. So if you see here, the changes, the tracking of the changes of each files are like is in a file level. In case of Git, all the files are getting snapshot. When we are going from one version to another version, all the files are getting snapshot. So the version 2, if you see, A1 has got changed and B remains same, but still we are tracking C1 has changed. And on the version 3, A1 is still the same, B is still the same, but C2 has changed. And in version 4, A2 has changed, B1 has changed, B2 B1 has changed, and C2 remains same. So if you see, in each and every versions, we are just taking the snapshots of all the files. But in this case, in the version control system, which is not Git, we are just tracking the at a file level. So that is the basic difference. Since Git is a distributed version control system, once you pull all the changes from the server computer on your local machine, you have full track of the changes. For one file, you want to track the history, you want to go to, let's say, a couple of days back. But in case of centralized repository, every time you have to check with the server and then go to previous versions and then get that particular file. But in case of distributed, since you already getting all the track changes, so it's just that you're working on a local machine. You need not talk to any server machine to get the history. That is the beauty of distributed system, distributed version control systems. So in case of centralized version control system, get the history of file changes from server. That is in case of centralized version control system. But in case of distributed, once you pull the changes, all the history of changes will be present in your local machine. So you get the history of file changes from local machine. You need not talk to server every time you want to check the versions of your file. Let's understand how Git can actually go back to different versions. Let's say you want to go back to a couple of days back and see what is the actual file at that particular time. It actually creates a checksum. This is based on SHA-1 hash algorithm. So every time you create a new version, it runs the SHA-1 hash algorithm on top of the directory, and then it will try to create that particular version, so that you have different version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can easily go back to version 3 and version 2 and see what is the actual file at that particular point of time. So that is how actually Git works. Once it is creating this checksum, and this checksum is getting stored in a Git database. So as soon as you download the Git, this will also create a database, Git database. It will also install the Git database in your local machine. So as soon as it creates this checksum, so this checksum will be stored in the Git database. So this checksum will hold the entire snapshot of your folder. So before we continue understanding Git, so we have three main states in Git. So let's see what all these three main states. So we have working directory, we have staging area, and finally we are calling it as a .git directory, which is something called repository. So what is working directory? So right now, if you see, I am in a directory called git introduction. So this is your working directory. You will have all the files that needs to be tracked. Now this is something called working directory. Okay. Now what is staging area? Now staging area is, so before you're asking your git to track the file, so you need to tell, okay, what file should I track? You need to tell git that what file should I track. So in between we have something called staging area. So as soon as you start working on your file and you think, okay, this file is ready to be tracked by git, you move that to staging area. Once you move that to staging area, file starts getting tracked. We have a lot of ways to run git commands. So like we have something called GitHub desktop, where we can run git commands and commit the changes to GitHub repository. And we also have something called git kraken. This is also beautiful tool. Even though there are a lot of UI tools to run git commands, they have some limitations. So basically it's good to actually learn git command line. We don't have any restrictions, and if there is any complexities that you want to, also you eventually have to come to command line and then run the git commands. In this video we'll just see how to run a git commands using command line. Let's start installing the git. So all we have to go to is, let's go to Google and then just type git, and then the first link is git. So this is where you go to a git website, and then you see here you can download for based on your operating system. If you want, you can also download GUIs. As I told, it is again a UI version to run git commands, and it is available for almost all the OS, Windows, Linux as well. In this video we will install git and run using command line. So in order to check whether git is installed or not, you have to type git space hyphen version. So I am currently using 2.39.2, but install the new version of your git. So before running the git commands, first you need to set up your name and email. Okay, so these are important because as soon as you do some changes to a particular file, your time, the time at which the file has changed, and at the same time who has changed, that information will be tracked and get stored in your git database. So in order to do that, first you need to give what name, your name, right? So before that you need to understand this configuration, whatever I'm setting right now, how it should affect. It should affect at the system level or local level or global level. So what is system level? In case of system level, the name or the email that you are configuring will affect in all the accounts and all the directories that you're using on the current system. So in case of local, so it actually affects the current directory, only the current folder. Okay, but in case of global, for that particular account, all the folders. But in case of local, only that particular account and that particular directory. In case of system, all the accounts in the computer and all the folders. So first let's set up our git. So git config and then hyphen hyphen global and then user dot name. Okay, I'm just typing Sebastian Street. Let me clear this. So I'm configuring with my username, and again git config hyphen hyphen global user dot email. So my email is, so first time I've given double quotes because I have spaces. So but in case of email I don't have any spaces, so I'm just typing as it is. Okay, as these two are set, the next thing that we need to set is our code editor, and let me set my editor git config hyphen hyphen global core dot editor, and this is, since I'm using VS Code, I'm using code hyphen hyphen wait. We'll discuss about why I have given hyphen hyphen wait. For now, I'm setting my git. My default editor should be VS Code. Okay, instead of VS Code, actually I'm using Code Insiders. So git, I'll change my config git config hyphen hyphen global, and then I want to change core dot editor to something called code hyphen insiders. So if you have installed VS Code, you can just say code, but since I have installed code insiders, so I'm actually giving code insiders hyphen hyphen wait. I'll tell you what is actually wait about. So let me have this. Now in order, you can just list out all the things that you have actually configured. You can say git config hyphen hyphen global, and you can say hyphen hyphen list. So this will tell you what you have configured so far, and you can just say Q to quit that. And if you want to open in this VS Code, you can also say git config hyphen hyphen global, and then you can say hyphen E. So this command actually opens all your whatever you have configured so far in VS Code. So since I have given code insiders, it is opening in my code insiders. This is also a part of VS Code only. So see, so it is waiting for editor to close the file. So the reason that we gave hyphen hyphen wait is, as soon as I close the file, my command comes back. But so far it is not. It is still waiting for the file to get closed. Okay. So hope everything looks fine here. So I'll close it. So if you see here, okay, my command line is back again. So let me clear my directory. So I don't have any files in my directory. Now let's initialize git. So how do we initialize git? Init means initializing our git. So right now if you see, I am in my code directory and then git in my code directory, git introduction directory. Right now there is no git symbols that you see, but right now when I type git init, you see that initialized empty git repository in this particular directory. Right now you see that there is a git and then main branch has been come up, right? I mean, if this doesn't come in your command prompt, that's totally fine. So for this you need to install something called, in case of Mac, you need to install something called oh my zsh. This is in case of Windows, you need to install oh my push. So I mean, if you install these plugins, then your command prompt also should look something like this. I mean, you can just Google it and see how you can install that. uh, Let me close this for now. Right now the git has been initialized. Now let's see ls. Yes, we don't have any other directories, but let's see if there are any hidden files. There you go. So you see there is a hidden directory called .git. Now let's look into this, what is actually we have in this .git. So since I'm in Mac, I can just type control command and then dot. I can see the hidden file. So if I see here, we have hooks, information, some objects, references. So we need not actually worry about it. In order to start with git and use git, you don't really care about this, but that is the reason it has been kept in as a hidden file. So you have to be very careful with this .git file. So let's -a, so you see .git, and let's say by mistake you are trying to remove this .git. By mistake the git has been removed, right? So you will not see any you will lose all the track changes. So make sure that you have this .git. So let me initialize back again. Right, now you have your git repository initialized. Now that you have a git initialized in your folder, now let's understand the git workflow. So we have 3 stages in the git workflow. We have working directory, staging area, and git repository. So let's understand the git repository. So right now you have a folder, right? So now this gets converted to local repository as soon as you type git init. So now that you have already initialized your git, now your folder is called as a local git repository. Okay. Now let's understand what is the working directory. So when we type pwd, which is present working directory, you will get at which directory you are in currently. So we are in a git introduction directory. So this is actually a working directory. Now let's understand what is stage. So let's say I'm trying to create a file1.txt. Now let's understand this using a diagram. So let's have different files. We have file1.txt, and then we have different files. This as file2.txt, and this as file3.txt. And then you want to finally commit to the git local repository. So this is called git local repository. So you have number of files, file1, file2, and file3, and you commit. So what we generally do is we actually commit. So we actually commit all the file changes. Okay, you commit all those file changes to git local repository. So before you commit, and there is something in the middle called staging area. Sometimes this is also called index. So you call it as staging. Sometimes it is called index area. So this is nothing but before you commit anything to the local repository, you're just storing what you're trying to commit. Assume this as a production and this as a staging area, staging environment or QA environment. So whatever the file you want to commit to the local repository to track the changes, to start tracking the changes, you first move that to staging and then move to local repository. So this is how actually it works. And once you commit the changes uh, to the local repository, then still there will be files in the staging area, because the staging area is nothing but a replication of your git local repository. That is how generally it works, right? So your staging area will always reflect your production environment. In the same way here also, even though you commit all the files to git local repository, you still see the files in the staging area. I'll just show you how internally it works. So let me remove, so the staging area. So let's say you're trying to add first to staging. Okay, so in now your file 1 will be present in your staging area. Okay, and then let's say you're trying to add file 2 as well. Now your file 2 will also be present in your staging area. And once you add, the command is git add file1.txt space file2.txt. Once you add this, it will be moved to staging, and then you commit to move these files to git local repository. Okay, so this is how actually it works. But once you commit, you have to what you have to understand is, even though you commit, you still see the files in your staging or the index area. Now let's see this in practice. Now I have a file1.txt. I just have some text in it. Now let me create another file. Let's say file2.txt. Let's say git is a version control system. Okay. Now if I do git status, I should see two files. And since these are in red color, because these two files hasn't been added to the stage yet, so let's add these files to the staging directory. Git add file1.txt and file2.txt. You can add something like this, or if you don't want to add something like this, then you can give the patterns as well, star.txt, or you can also say git dot. It means what all the files that you have in the current directory, it will add everything to the staging. But just this is not a good practice, because you might have some log files which you don't want to add to the directory. We will see how to ignore those files. I'll tell you later. But right now, let's just try to add file1 and file2.txt. Now we have added. Now let me say git status. Now it should, yeah, it has turned to green, because these two files now have been added to the staging. Now let's say something interesting. Now let me go to file 1 and let's say new line added. Okay, now let me run git status. Now if you see that in the staging area we have file 1 and file 2, but it says that there is some modified, file 1 has been modified. So you can ask me, hey Sebastian, we already added file 1 to the staging, but still why it shows? It can tell that okay, there is some line has been added and it is something called modified, and it is modified. So how do we add? We need to add this as well. So git add file1.txt. So now let's see a git status. Now it is green. That means all the changes that we have done so far has been added to the staging. Now let's understand how to commit these files. So we can say git commit -m, and you can give your commit message. Let's say I'm giving some inch commit. This is the very first time I'm doing the commit. I'm just giving initial commit, but generally we give a meaningful commit messages. Why do we give meaningful messages? Because you can easily track when you go back to your different versions of your files. You can easily track, okay, at that particular time I fixed that bug, and at that particular time maybe I have added this a new enhanced feature. So generally we don't randomly update, we just don't want to give a default update commits. The best way to do is, like, you can just say git commit if you don't want to type the message in a single line, if you want to give detailed commit message, which is generally followed in the large tech companies, you just type git commit, and this will get opened in your default editor. Since we already configured default editor to be a VS Code, it is opening in the VS Code. Now we can say short description, and you can just one line break and then give a long description. For now we'll just say initial commit, and you can just, this is my first commit message. Once you're done, you close this. Let me open. You see that 2 files has been changed, 4 insertions, and we have created 2 files. So now these 2 files have been added to your Git repository, local repository. Now let's say you want to commit your changes without pushing to the staging directory. I mean, right now we are following, first you add a file to the staging and then you move that to a local repository. Let's say, what if you don't want to add to staging first and then you directly want to move to the local repository? First let's add something in file 2, new line added. Now let's say git status. Okay, oh, I see that one file has been changed. Now in order to directly move to local git local repository, you can say git commit -a. -a means you want to add all the files, and then -m you want to give a commit message, or you can just you can say -am, and then you can say that added a new line to file2.txt. So this is how you can just commit. You can just say git status. So your working tree is clean. Okay, now let's assume you have 2 files, file1.txt and file2.txt. Let's assume that we need to remove file2.txt. So let me remove file2.txt. Now let me do git status. It says that okay, one of the files has been deleted, that is not added to the stage yet. If it is red, it means that it is not added to the stage yet. Let me prove that to you. Git ls files. So first let's look at ls-a. So you see there is no file2. Now git list files, this will give us all the files listed in the staging area. See, even though file2.txt is deleted, we can still see the file2.txt in the staging area. So how do we add that deletion to the staging area? So we just say git add file2.txt. Now once you add this git add, now you type git status. It says that okay, this file has been deleted. Now you can check your files as well. See, in the staging area we don't have the file2.txt, and then you can finally commit -m. So removed unused file2.txt. Now it is done. My working directory is clean. Let's say if that is not the case, let me add back again. Now git status. Now let me add this and commit this. Add file2 again. Now let's do git status. Your working directory is clean. Now let's say you want to remove file2. You want to remove both in the working directory as well as in the staging directory. Okay, if that is the case, now what we have to do is git remove file2.txt. now if you see git status, it is deleted. Git list files, it is deleted. Okay, now you just need to commit your message, remove file2. Okay, so what we did, first we deleted the file2 from the working directory, and then we added that deleted file to staging, and then we committed it. Instead of first deleting in the working directory and then deleting in the adding that to the staging area, we can directly remove from working directory as well as staging by using git remove. So this does two things. It will remove from your present working directory as well as from your staging, and then you can finally commit your message. Now let's understand how to rename a file. Now let's see all the files. Okay, let's try to rename file 1, move file1 dot txt. Let's say I'm renaming to file1 renamed dot txt. Now the file1 has been renamed to file1 underscore renamed. Now let's see, yes, it is renamed. Now let's do git status. It will show two things, because in your stage file you have file1.txt, but in your present working directory you have removed this and you have added this, right? So you have to add both the things to your staging to your staging area. So git add file1 underscore renamed. Okay, and then let me do git status. One is added. Now let's add the other one, git add file1.txt. So I'm adding both the things. Now let's do git status. You see that git is smart that okay, it understood, okay, file has been renamed, that is file1.txt to file1 underscore renamed. Let's say you want to do this in a single command. You can say git move instead of directly using a Linux command move. You can just use git move, and then you can say file1 underscore renamed dot. Now I am moving back file1 renamed to file1.txt. Instead of renaming and then adding to stage, I am doing this in single command. So that's it. Now let's do git status. Your branch is clean. Now let's say git list files. You see that file1 underscore rename dot txt has been again changed to file1.txt. Now let's understand how to ignore files before we add and commit. So firstly, let's have a folder. I'm calling it as logs. I mean, as soon as you run your code locally, it might generate huge logs, and we don't want to add these logs to the repository, right? So let's add a new file here, like logs underscore one dot something. Okay, let me close this. Okay, now you see git status. You see that logs has been untracked, and let's say you don't want to add this. So for that, let's create git ignore dot git ignore. So this git ignore you have to create at the root directory, root of your present working directory. So since git introduction is my present root working directory, I've created git ignore here to add this logs slash, and then let me save this. Now if you see here, now this has been previously it was highlighted. After adding this logs, let me show that. So it is highlighted now after adding logs slash. If you see, so it's not highlighting now. So now if I just take its status, now it is not showing logs, it is just showing git ignore. So let me add that git ignore, and then git commit. Let me change the message, added logs directory to git ignore. Okay, so now my working directory should be clean. Now let's consider a real-time scenario. Let's say you have a folder called tests, and inside tests, let's say you have test underscore one dot txt, and by accidentally you have committed this. So let's say git status git add tests git status. Now it is added to staging. Now let's commit this, added tests. Okay, now Now my working directory is clean. Okay, now I have accidentally committed my tests, and I don't want, every time I rerun my tests in my current directory, it will create a new files. Let's assume test underscore 2 dot, it will create a new files like this, and every time I don't want to commit this tests directory to my local repository. So how do I do that? Let's say even in the git ignore, let's say I'm trying to add this tests slash, even though I'm trying to add this, let's see, it will not it will still not ignore git status. See, it is just saying git ignore localhost add this dot git ignore, sorry, git add dot git ignore. Okay, now commit. So added tests directory to git ignore. Let me have this. Okay, added test directory to git ignore. Now doing a git status. Okay, my working directory is clean. Now let's say after again I ran one more tests, and then it is creating the test underscore 3. Okay, my message here. Okay, now let's say git status. You see that even though I have added tests directory to my git ignore, it is still not ignoring. So how do we resolve this problem? So first, okay, git status, it is still showing. Okay, how do we resolve this problem? The problem is it with the staging. In the staging area, we still have this test directory that is tracking. So you can just say git list files. You see that? So in the staging area, we have this tests directory which is getting tracked. So we first need to remove this, and then we should be able to fix that problem. So how do we remove? If we run this git rm command, it will remove from both working directory as well as staging directory. But we don't want that to happen. We just want to remove the staging but not in the working directory. Okay, so let's say git remove. Let's have a help command. So what we have to do is git remove, and then we have to say cached. This will remove from the index, right? So staging area is also called as a index area, right? So we will say git remove hyphen hyphen cached, and then what should we remove? Let me just type git ls files, and then git remove hyphen hyphen cached cached, and this test underscore 1 dot txt. Okay, now let's say git list files. Okay, now it is removed. Now let's do a git status. Yeah, now staging area is different from the local repository, git local repository. So let's commit. Let's say that accidentally committed the tests directory. Okay, now that is committed. Now let's do a git status. Your working directory is clean now, right? Even though, let's say if you're adding one message here, let's say added new line here. Now let's type git status. Your branch is clean. So this is how you resolve. Okay, now that you have learned how to run a git status, now let's see how to run a git status in a short form. Okay, so git status hyphen s is the command how we can run a short form. But before that, let's see some examples. I love using git. Now let's add one more file 2.txt. Git is a version control system. Now let's run git status. Now you see that if you don't want to look at these many lines to just see what is actually the status, you can just run in a short form. So hyphen s gives you a short form of your status. So if you see here, you need to understand this. So you have two columns here. So one refers to uh, okay, your working directory has some change when compared to the staging directory. And what about file2.txt? It clearly says that nothing has been added to the staging directory, and also staging directory, when compared to staging directory and local repository, that is also untracked. So file2 is completely untracked. Okay, now let's add file1.txt and let's run git status hyphen s. Now you see that the whatever the changes that we have made so far, we have added that from working directory to staging. Now this m means when compared to the local git repository, it is considering that okay, it is modified. Okay, it's not added, it is modified, and your working directory is clean, it is ready to commit. Now let's do some more changes in our file1.txt. Added a new line. Okay, now let's run git status hyphen s. Now you see that, so when compared to a working directory with staging, it is modified, and there is also some more changes which is ready to get committed to the local git repository. Okay, now let's run git add. Let's add that modified changes as well. Now let's run git status hyphen s. Okay, now we're good. Now let's add file2.txt and git status hyphen s. Let me clear the screen and run once again. Now you see that file1 has been completely added when compared to staging directory with local git repository. It understood it is modified, file1 is modified. But in case of file2, okay, there is no file2 in the local git repository, so it is telling that okay, I have to add this file to the from staging directory to local git repository. Okay, you have worked on a couple of files and you added all these files to the staging area, and you want to understand again what all before I commit, what all the changes, what all the lines has been added. Okay, you want to check that. So in order to do that, we have a command called git diff. Okay, so let's add some changes to this. Is a new message. Okay, now git status. Okay, this has been modified. Now let's add this file1.txt git status. Okay, now this has been added to your staging area. Okay, now how do you before you commit, you want to check what all the lines has been added. In order to do that, you have a command called git diff and then hyphen hyphen staged. So this is a command. This compares your staging area with your local git repository. So before you commit, if you want to check the changes, you can just run git diff hyphen hyphen staged. So this gives us okay, you have added this is a new message. Okay, you have added some line. Okay, it gives a brief description what you have done so far. Okay, now let me press q to quit, and let me add this. Sorry, I've added. Now let me commit. Okay, now git status. Now in order to compare what is your present working directory with the staging area, okay, let's say let's add git is a distributed version control system. Okay, now git status. So I haven't added this yet to my staging area. So in order to in order to understand, okay, in order to compare my working directory with the staging area, I just need to type git diff without any arguments. So, and this gives, okay, this compares my working directory with the staging tree. Okay, let me press Q to quit, and git add file to .txt, and then git commit, git description added to file to git status. Now let's understand how we can get this differences using code editor. Right now I'm using a VS Code. Now let's use the same editor to get the difference using the code editor. It is somewhat better than this. So in order to do that, you need to configure this. So git, let me show, yeah. Now git config global diff.tool. I'm using VS Code. Okay, so git config global difftool.vscode.cmd. I'm using code insiders because my VS Code is of code insiders. You can use, if you're using VS Code, just type code, okay, and then hyphen hyphen wait, hyphen hyphen diff local remote. Now let's add this command, and let's git config. Let's see what we have. Global hyphen e. It will open that in the editor. Okay, let me, okay, now we have added this. Okay, now I'm just saving this, close. Your command prompt is back. Now you can say git, let's add couple of things. Added a new feature in file 1. Okay, and then let's do a git diff tool. Okay, git diff tool is a command. Okay, now it is asking to launch it, so let's type y and then enter. So you can see that, okay, what is there previously and what we have added just now. Okay, so this is how you launch code editor to understand the difference between working directory and your staging, which is git diff tool. Let's close this. Now let's add these changes to the staging area. Let's git status. Okay, git add file 1 dot text. Now let's see git status hyphen s. Okay, it is modified. Now let's compare your staging area with the local git repository before we commit, right? So we can say git diff tool, and then we can say hyphen hyphen staged. So this compares with the staging area with the local git repository. Okay, now it is asking, let's type s. Okay, so this is the change. Okay, okay, hope you understood. So we have to close this. A command prompt would be back, and git status hyphen s. Let's commit hyphen new feature added to file 1. Now let's say you have committed all these changes, and let's say you want to see your file, let's say a couple of days back. Okay, you want to go back to your history of your file. So how do you do it? So once you whatever you're trying to commit, everything will be stored in something called git log. Okay, so git logs gives us all the things that we have done so far. You can just type space to go for the next page. Okay, since it's very long, and if let's say you want to have a short form how to look this, you can say git log, and then you can say hyphen hyphen one line. It gives us in a single line. So if you see, every commit has been added as a hash snapshot, and of the entire folder that you have to a git database. So initial commit was done at the very starting, it's coming at the very last. So let's say you want to get that in a reverse order. Now let's type q to quit the panel, and then let's say git log hyphen one line, and we have come something called hyphen hyphen reverse. So this will gives us from starting till. So the first you see is a initial commit followed by the next commits. Okay, now let's say you want to go to the very first commit and you want to see what is my in the initial commit, what is how my file one dot text look like. Okay, now right now I have added many things. Okay, now let's quit this and let's say git show, and then I want to git show paste the commit hashed checksum, and then I will say file one.txt. Okay, now it will give us, it will take back to the that particular commit message. And what does the actual file look like? Okay, in the initial commit, this is the first message, and it is just like we added. Okay, git is awesome, and these are the lines that we have added. Okay, so this is how you can go back and see what does the actual file look like in previous versions. Now let's assume that you want to go back to your previous commit. That in that case, let's first see if there is any changes. Okay, your branch is clean, your working directory is clean. Now I'll go to file 2, and then let's say new feature added to file 2. Okay, now let's say git status and git add file 2, and then git commit new feature added to file 2. Now git status. Okay, now you have added a new feature, and let's say you added one new line to file 2, and you by mistake committed this as well. So let's say, how do you undo this? In order to do that, first you have to go to git log one line to understand. Okay, right now you are in this particular commit message. Let's say you want to go to this you don't want to add a new feature to file, you want to go back to the previous version. So for that, you just copy this particular commit hashed checksum, and then say quit, and then let's say git restore, and then you say hyphen hyphen source equals that you paste that particular checksum, git checksum that it has calculated, and then you just give the file name, so file2 dot text. So if you do it, git restore, now that you have removed that, you have moved back to your previous version. Now if you type git status, it states that okay, this is modified. And let's add this modified thing, git add file2 dot text, and then git status, it's been added to your staging area. Now let's commit, let's say accidentally added feature to file 2. Okay, so this is how you resolve when you accidentally commit something and you want to undo this, you use a restore command. Okay, and we can also do that in other way, like git restore, and we can just say hyphen hyphen source equals, you can just say head tilde 1. So what does this mean? It means that your head is in the current commit, right? Your head is in the current pointing to the current commit, and you want to go back to your previous snapshot, previous commit. Okay, so you do that. So tilde 1 means you want to go one level back. Okay, let's say if you do 2, it means that you want to go 2 levels back. Okay, so that is how you can do it the other way, instead of giving the exact commit checksum that it has calculated. This is another way of doing it. Okay, now let's understand, by mistake you have added some codes, some lines of codes, and let's say in 10 or 15 files, and it is of no use, and you want to come back to your you just added to the stage, you haven't committed yet. So let's assume that is a scenario. Let's say in file 2, let's say new bug has been identified. Okay, let's say this is a, let's say git status, and let's say you have added this, and okay, you haven't added to the staging area, and this has been done for like 10 15 files, and you just want to come back how it looked like how you want to just clean your working directory how it looked like previously. So you just want to undo all the changes. You can just say git restore file 2.txt, and this will remove all it, this will undo all the changes that you have done for all the files. If you want to do for all the files, this will do only for the file 2. If you want to do for all the files, you can just say git restore dot, it will undo all the things. But let's say you have added file 3.txt. Okay, this, okay, file 3 has been added, but when you do a git restore, this will not restore your file 3, because what actually git restore does is, whatever the snapshot that it has in the staging area, it will just make a copy to your working directory. That is what that is how git restore works. So in your staging area, git less files. So you have already file 2.txt, and you made some changes to your file 2. Let's say new bug identified. Okay, and you just say git status. Okay, now let's say git restore dot. Now what does this do? It will make a copy of to working directory from staging directory. So git restore, what it has done is, it has made a copy from, staging area and pasted in your working directory. But what about file 3? File 3, it did not find in the, file 3 is not present in the staging area yet. So how can it can make copy? It can't do that. So for that, if that is a scenario, how do you deal with it? So you say something called git clean. So git clean, so it is giving us a warning that okay, it is some dangerous option. Once you do it, you can't actually recover the files. So okay, let's say git clean, and then let's type -h to get the help options. So have to force remove from the whole directories. Okay, so let's git clean hyphen f and then hyphen d. So it is removing the file 3. So this is how you actually remove the untracked files if you want your working directory to be clean.